Oh, there's been some great presentations, and the one that particularly struck home with me yesterday was the Lango Rourke one, when Andrew was talking about some of the projects that they've worked on, in particular the Heathrow Terminal 5 project, which basically kick-started where we are today with the products. We won that software contract over a homegrown solution from the UK, BS Link, and I think ABS were involved as well. But we won it with the CAD duct program. One of the reasons is we could manufacture. So, you know, way back then we were fabricating directly from the product. But what we had to do was commit to them that we would develop pipe and electrical containment for the product, which we did, and that's where we ended up with CAD MEP. You know, Revit wasn't around at the time. I think it's fair to say that if it wasn't for Autodesk acquiring MEP, 6-7 years ago now, we would have not have had the fabrication parts in Revit today. I do remember my first AU after the acquisition, and standing on the main stage and talking to the customers, promising them that their investment in fabrication parts and their fabrication configurations was safe. And I'd like to think we kept that promise. Fab parts in Revit, what next? Well, Stratus. When I saw what Todd and his team of agile developers were doing, the amount of work they were cranking out, it reminded me of the old MEP days. It felt like a reboot. This is the team, or some of the team. It's grown a bit since then. But I really like what I saw, and I can see that it was going to be a game changer for the shop and field. I will say it wasn't my first choice. When I left Autodesk, I sent that picture and my bio to Pinewood Studios. I heard they were looking for a new James Bond, but unfortunately I didn't get it. So I ended up with Todd. Todd's going to take over from now. He's my demo jockey, and he's going to talk you through some of the products.
All right, thank you, Andy. Todd Liebbe with GTP, background, as mentioned, 30 years in the industry. Like Andy, I stayed at Autodesk as well. Andy, you were there how many years?
6.
I was 6 weeks. My time was a little shorter. But they put a big smile on my face about 5-6 years ago when they acquired some software, which is now Autodesk Point Layout. So we were running robotic total stations. And while I was there, you know, you're able to kind of see inside what they're up to. And what got me more excited than anything was a platform at that time called the Large Model Viewer, which has now become Forge, which is, you know, BIM 360 docs. And I said, oh my goodness, they've given me a tool to really fulfill what most of the mechanicals, and can I get a show of hands of how many piping contractors, mechanical we have in the room? And then ductwork, any electricals? So back in the States, we have this, what we call earned value, which is this whole idea that we could estimate something and then actually know what the cost is at the end of the day to say, hey, did we make money? And can we figure that out, maybe not at the end, but as we go? In a lot of ways, that's what Stratus is. It's a package to help you track that earned value. But along the way, what it helps you do as well is your prefab, your productivity, your procurement. The team I have up here is that we have 7 full-time developers now, and they're all working on the package of Stratus. So what does the tool do? A couple things up here, you know, as you start to look at those bold items, tool integration is one near and dear to my heart. I'm an engineer. And I look at, you know, the Internet of Things, and I see it as the Internet of Tools. There's all kinds of automated tools, but when you look at them, a lot of those tools are being fed in a manual process. We'll show you today how we're feeding directly from Stratus to all kinds of different tools, direct download to those devices. When we look at estimating project costing, you know, Andy, with the fabrication product, there's estimated cost in that. We're exposing that in Stratus. So giving you a glimpse that, hey, what is this supply error? What is this spool drawing worth? And then we're also giving you methods of looking at diameter inches and different methods of figuring out what that cost is. So a few things. We don't need to spend a lot of time on the AutoCAD side because you guys have drank the Autodesk Kool-Aid and you're utilizing at a high level Revit here. We haven't quite got there yet back in the States, but we're quickly starting to transition there. But I was super excited when I heard how you've engaged in Revit, your BIM MEP initiative as far as I'm looking at this and saying, why can't we do something similar back in the States? You're building standards, and it's those standards that really help us with lean workflows. So we take the information directly out of your authoring software. We publish it from Revit into Stratus. And so we work really close with the BIM 360. It's pretty much required as part of our workflow. We're up on the BIM 360 store. That's us down there. This slide here, as far as when you start to look at Stratus, and as I mentioned, it allows you to do your procurement, your prefab. It's really almost a conditioning tool to be able to look at that model and say, how are you going to condition that model from a perspective of the way I'm going to build it? When you look at some of the projects here, you know, there's a lot of times where you could look at a first floor and you say, hey, I can do that whole first floor. I can cut all my pipe, I can deliver all my ductwork, but oftentimes there's pour schedules, there's areas. So one thing we can do within Stratus here is that we can break those into different work areas. And so you can release the ductwork by these segments. So those are all defined in Stratus, and they just become another level of filter to be able to do your work breakdown. Assemblies, spooling. When you look at the amount of time we spend creating that LOD model, and then taking that LOD model then and breaking it down into what we call spools, which are, you know, can be ductwork, piping, a piece of pipe with an elbow on it. Typically, my contractors are telling me they're spending about 20 to 30% of their time taking those spools, creating them, whether it's in Revit, you have to create the sheets. After you create the sheet, then you then have to dimension that sheet. Then you have to go print a PDF, and then you may have to print that PDF and deliver it somehow out to the job site. We're talking, we want to move to a digital workflow, and Stratus enables you to move to a digital workflow. We have a growing number of shops back in the States that are basically abandoning the paper, putting in these TV monitors. I mean, they're almost disposable now, a $300 TV monitor, and they have a digital representation of the spool out in the fab shop. Packages, you don't build one spool at a time, you build a package, and so you want to be able to queue that package up, and so we do advanced work packaging in the system. I can look at all my supply air, I can look at all my heating hot water of a certain size up and say, hey, let me go grab all my welded based upon that area. We'll package it all up. We're going to create your BOM for being able to order those items. We're also going to enable you to download the various cutting devices, and so we're going to track that whole workflow through the package application. All this information then gets rolled up into a schedule here, so all of our packages are able to be tracked. When you look at your fabrication, and especially here in Australia where I look at some of your duct manufacturers, you know, whether they're doing rectangular duct, spiral, flat, oval, all of those have somewhat of a separate workflow. And so in Stratus, we can create those packages and then filter that package down and then be able to look at your loading and help you schedule that all out. It's got a full Kanban board with definable by you as well, so you can define what your workflow is via that device and set up and just start dragging the cards over for how you're going to run that in your fab shop. Track all your progress with to-dos by individual. Real-time updates. So how many of you think your owners would ever like to see whether you actually got the stuff in today? Now I should be seeing 100% hands up, okay? When you look at Stratus and you look at this idea of being able to track things, that's what is one of the things that so many of my contractors are excited about, is instantly being able to go mark that either through a QR code or just selecting the elements and say, hey, this is installed. When things get installed, it helps a contractor from a perspective of, you can then do what is one of your favorite things to do? Maybe bill. It gives you that ability to bill and then be able to back that up with what you got done for the day. Any type of assembly you need to see, we do a ton back in the States. We're building more and more racks where we're bringing the trades together, the mechanicals, electricals, ductwork, building these rack systems. Not only can we do individual spools, but then we can also do package racks. Skids are huge now too, where we're building pump packages mounted to a skid, and all that can be tracked in the system in addition. You've got various types of charts, so you're looking at maybe weld diameter inches, if there's certain KPIs that you're interested in doing. We dump all the information out for all the ITM data, so you can literally write any type of report you want, and then you can also create any type of chart to go along with that report. Dimensioning here, as far as I think I'm only going to spend about 5 to 10 minutes today on fractions in the group. I understand that was a big topic here as far as the system does metric, but I don't. So as far as you'll see a few dimensions up there that are fractions, I apologize for that, but the system does work in metric a lot better than I do here. Tool integration here. The check marks are the tools that we're currently tied into. But for those of you that do electrical, we can take the information out of the Revit file and create a CSV that can download directly into that. We're creating point files now for robotic total stations. These point files can be driven by either Leica, Trimble, or Topcon. T-drill, that's a fabulous machine. It can take a header of copper, pull all the T's in it. We've got the Watts interface as well for your larger diameter pipe. This one here, this is what's called a Tiger Stop. It's a single axis CNC machine. So when you look at, for my piping contractors in the room, how many times you're pulling the tape to cut a piece of copper that's 2'6", or a piece of unistrut, or a piece of all-thread ride. It's almost mind-blowing when we look at a commercial project. We sometimes get this enamored with the bigger diameter, but in a lot of ways we just cut 60–70% of what you cut is going to be those smaller diameter pipe, unistrut, all-thread, as I mentioned. This is a single-axis CNC machine, so we're able to take the information from your model. The fence will move left or right. You load up your pipe, and it literally will push that pipe down, nest it. You're getting so little waste now. But on top of having very little waste, it's going to number it. It's going to put a QR code on that for you. So now you can scan that QR code and say, hey, take me to the spool, take me to where that is in the building. The QR code can drive all kinds of upstream value for you. Auto dimensioning of all the spools, as I mentioned earlier. Download to various types of CNC devices. Pipe cutting is one. We'll give you a full-blown video on that. We're now creating also as far as complete bombs that are editable. Tracking status is update on the fly. We'll show that to you. This one, a lot of people love this portion of Stratus in that when we look at, and they're great packages, Bluebeam, all those packages, but in so many ways they're kind of a representation, a snapshot in time. And a lot of times you have to think, what's the field really after? You know, what type of information? And I really kind of feel like you should be able to open up the model and say, what do I want to consume? Do I want grid lines? That's what Stratus enables you to do, snap on an item, and we don't have to pull to the grid line. We'll pull automatically and give you all the dimensioning you need as well. Different levels, floors, coordinate systems are all lined up. This here is a place for everything and everything in its place. So when you look at the amount of carts you're buying or building, when I was over at Duct Manufacturer earlier in the week, I asked them, how many containers they have, and they have more and more containers because the contractors are starting to understand, the installers, that do I really just want that one piece of ductwork, or do I want that one piece of ductwork along with my transition and another straight piece? Those containers go to the job site, and within Stratus, we're going to give you a holistic view of saying, hey, what's on my job site, what's been installed, be able to know what's in that cart and just, hey, tag it, say all those items are installed. So we're going to give you real-time tracking at the job site. Stratus, when it comes to as far as hangers as well, the Bluetooth piece, it really is that whole workflow and dialing the supply chain in as well. So all kinds of benefits as far as within the product, as far as what it's going to do. But one of the big ones, obviously, is the productivity savings. It's going to give you not only in your shop, but also out in the field. So let's give you a peek here of what the product can do. So here is a office building, and when you look at this office building, this was drawn in Revit. We posted it to Stratus, and there's all kinds of different views we can look at here. One of the things that I, drove the design team and said we need to be able to have grid systems, so we can flip on a grid system because we're all about coordinates and knowing where things are, and you have to have a grid to understand where those items are going to go in your base model. We also, because of the various systems, we want to be able to filter down very quickly by all your different systems, see those systems and know where they are off the grid line. So if for some reason there's the pile of ductwork in a certain location, you can come over here and say, hey, let's go off that different grid, and I'll snap to the new grid that quickly. I'm going to jump over to an equipment room here now. So in my upper left-hand corner, this is the toolbar that comes out with Stratus. And that toolbar gives you different display modes of how do I want to see my job today. And the first one I'm going to click on here is that I'm an installer, and I'm like, I wonder how they decided to break this job down. I can click on assemblies, and I'll color code every unique assembly for you. We're not, in an hour, we can't run through all the functionality in the product, but not only can we view the assemblies, but we can also create them. So the thing that about happens that when you look at modelers and detailers, sketchers, if you look at their time they spend modeling, as much as you wish it was 90, 100% modeling, their days are continually filled with, give me a point file, give me a bomb, give me this, give me that, because what we've learned is all that information lives back in the authoring software. And so those questions don't come up anymore, and that Stratus can answer a lot of that. So we give it back to the field, and that lines into even assemblies. Who knows the job site conditions better? Who knows that that freight elevator isn't going to allow me to take that size spool in? A lot of times we make these decisions spooling the job when the best people to spool the job are the people out at the job site, the field installers, to be able to say, hey, where do I want those breaks to happen? And we can do that in Stratus. So I opened this up. I showed you where all the different spools differentiate, but the other thing I can do too is I can click on my tracking module. And once I click on the tracking module, this thing will flip again, and it'll start showing me all of your various color codes. The way you have standards here, it wouldn't be a surprise that, if we start to get some Stratus down here, you may want to start to define certain color codes so that you all understand, hey, this means it's been fabricated, installed, shipped. So let's go drive into a particular assembly and show you what those look like here. So when I click on this assembly in my model, you'll see it gave me a hyperlink over here. Every unique assembly just gives me a different hyperlink. I'm going to click on that one, click here, and that's going to drive me into that individual spool. So a lot of times in your workflow, you're having to take that spool, create a sheet. We don't have to do any of that. We just say, hey, here's your start and end point, and then it'll come up here and it'll create that spool on the left-hand side. And on top of that here, it'll auto-dimension it all, and it'll give you your bill of materials up on the right-hand side. So it'll show you your material. We can create formulas in this now as well. So if you want to see diameter inches, if there's certain information that lives in the fabrication ITM data, we can expose all that in the column headings. You can create any type of report you want that's going to go along with that spool. The part of the dimensioning as well is that if you've ever used some of the dimensioning tools like in Bluebeam or even in some of the Autodesk products, they enable you to snap to about anything. But when you're looking at it from a perspective of what we want to snap to, we really know the items and the touch points that we want to go to. With Andy on the team and as far as the knowledge of ITMs, so when I bring my mouse over here and I turn on my dimensioning tool, and who would be calling me from my wife is coming to Australia, so she's letting me know right now. So when I come over here and I click on that particular flange opening, you'll see there that it marked that center point of that flange here. And if I move a little bit over to the right, that's the center point of that piece of pipe. So it'll only snap to the points that are the dimensional points you want to be able to pull from the model. What's the delta between those two? It's going to be your weld gap, right? So we also have something in Stratus called Spool Checker. Any of you that have created a spool, we're always faced with the struggle that we created that spool in. I created it with a 1/4-inch weld gap. But you know what? My fitter out there hates 1/4-inch. He likes to use an 1/8 inch. So you can go right up into that 1/8 inch weld gap, and we can modify that on the fly. And I can come over here and I can say, hey, let's change that to 1/4 inch. That's going to change my cut lengths and everything. So when I hit enter in there, you'll see it actually adjusted my cut length of that piece of pipe. Now, I could literally spend 15 to 20 minutes on that piece, because the way you do it today is that we're always working with somewhat dead-end documents, in that you created in the Fabrication, your authoring software, a cut list. That cut list is a snapshot in time. Now the spool made it down to the fab shop. They're going through this, and maybe that center to face was different on that elbow. It was Elkhart versus Mueller, or maybe that weld gap changed. My cut length changed instantly at that particular point in time. But what did not change was that CSV file I exported an hour or 2 hours ago. That's still the same CSV. So what did I just do? I just cut that wrong piece of pipe. So the beauty of Stratus, and being that it's all cloud-based, it's all real. So when you make a modification here, I'm just going to nest that pipe and I'm going to cut it differently now. So we're going to make that adjustment directly on the fly. We spent all this time creating this digital model, and this is literally what people are putting out in their fab shop, is a digital representation of that spool. A lot of times they'll say, hey, we don't even want the bomb over in the right, and they'll come over here and just say, hey, let's see what that looks like full screen. So they'll have a monitor just like this in their fab shop, pull any dimension you want, let's go building that item. All right, now, we spent all this time doing a digital model, and what I couldn't believe is we built all this, and one of my best clients said, Todd, I want a printout. I'm like, what do you mean you want a printout? We're trying to really move to a digital workflow. But if you look at a fab shop, I mean, there's still this requirement at times, you know, for that piece of paper, for that tag along. And so on top of that too, we can generate a report on the fly here, and we'll generate an isometric plan view, the bill of materials, everything for that particular spool. You'll also notice here in a minute where the QR code is up there too. We can scan that QR code because we can mark status changes on the fly here. So we can do this not only for piping, but we can also do this for ductwork too. So here's a particular piece of ductwork. I'm going to go in and look at the assembly of that piece of ductwork. And for those of you that are installers in the group, you know, oftentimes now you're wanting to move that to a you know, multiple pieces together now. All right, so there's that the particular spool we're after. I'm going to snap it here into an ISO view, and you'll see once again, and literally this is going to work ideally in your area because of your BIMMEP initiative here, you're using ITMs. This is in fittings that are drawn with ITMs, so all those snap points are going to work just like that, creating all those dimensional information top down from center of tap. We show all that to you, and on the right hand side we're going to give you your full construction information on how you're going to assemble that. Similar to what we were doing on the ductwork, I can come over here and click one button and I can generate a report as well. That'll generate my QR code.
Yeah, we can scale that.
I'm going to put my Andy Robbins, my Vanna, to work now. He's going to come over and you know, scan that QR code. Oop. So you'll see that fitting here can live through a series of status changes. Now, you can button these status changes up, and that you can have literally a workflow that if you go back in time, the system can say, well, why are we refabricating this piece? Mine is wide open, so I can change any status that I want on the fly here. Andy scanned that code. You can then log in, and this could be at your fabrication facility. It could be out at the job site. You can go in there, click on the QR code, and then flash that to a different status setting.
I'm getting that.
For each of those pieces too, as far as on the ductwork, all of those elements then, you know, can each have their own status too. So if an item has been back ordered, you can open up that particular spool and say, hey, let's not run this through production because you know, maybe I don't have that valve or I don't have that particular tap and I want to hold off on that. You can visually see is everything put together to be able to do that. Oh, yeah, yep. Okay, so there was the spool information. So let's jump back now and also show you a little bit more on the ductwork side too. So if I'm over here on my ductwork and if I look at my assemblies, I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to drive into one of these assemblies as well. When I pop into this assembly, it's going to give me that same view that we saw earlier. But now I'm going to show you a couple other functions in that, you know, being able to move around, not having to, you know, be able to do what, you know, some of these other packages make you do, set up all these different views, and then you have to build the hyperlinks to connect everything. You know, because we're working in the model, and the model has all that intelligence, we're being able to leverage that. So I can come over here, turn on my tags, and my hyperlinks, show hidden pieces, and you'll see over here that here, there's that duct run, but if I, you know, highlight that piece, it's going to hop me to that next piece instantly. And then it'll show me as far as, and all of its dimensioned, and I can go to piece to piece to piece. This also helps when you start loading up your containers and your carts of how you're going to access that information and put it in the containers for the way it's going to eventually hit the job site. So back to the equipment room here. So I showed you how the assemblies roll. Now let's go show you how the packages work. I click on packages now, and I want to see my packages, so I'll highlight the display mode. Showing me my packages. Going to click here, click on that item. It's going to go jump into my package. That package is, you know, various components, various spools that are put into that model. And that package is going to have data associated with it. And the data that you can associate with the package is, you know, where is it going to be processed? What fab shop is it going to go into? What you can also do is go over to this and put in what the required date is. So that package can have a date that it's required at the job site. Those estimated hours that you're seeing on that package, we'll soon be populating that directly from the fabrication estimating product that many of you use here. So we'll be able to put those hours in, which then leads you right into manpower loading and being able to see how long that package is going to take to build. If you click on the items are going to show you all the different assemblies that are part of that package. Over here on the tracking, you'll see where it says approved. If there was an element in that spool that was back ordered, you can see, hey, let's not start on spool 101 because guess what, guys? We don't have all the pipe here to go build that particular spool. We're working with a really large wholesaler supplier, the biggest one in the States, Ferguson Enterprises, and they were seeing that, hey, can you electronically send that information over? And so not only will we be able to transact with Ferguson, we'll obviously do others as time as we move in this project, but we are able to return that back. And they're sending me back the data of when that's going to hit the job site and what the lead time is on those elements. Along with that comes a user-definable BOM as well. The BOM is editable, so we can clean up the BOM and change descriptions, name headings, so that you can you know, buy from that package list here. Over here we have cut list. So when I hit generate cut list, it's going to look at all those spools, generate my cuts, and then it's going to pop over here, and we're going to show you a short little video here.
Stratus is the premier virtual design and construction solution built on the Autodesk Forge and BIM 360 platforms. Unique with Stratus is a tight integration with TigerStop, an automated smart fence hooked up to a saw to cut items like pipe, PVC, all-thread rod, and unistrut. Cut list measurements taken from the model are sent to a Surface Pro tablet attached to the TigerStop that controls positioning. The cut list interface optimizes material cuts for a fabricator who can move the TigerStop by pressing a button or by engaging the saw to trigger the TigerStop's next move. A label is immediately printed that includes the project, model, cut length, and QR code. Scan the QR code to launch a landing page, which gives the option to view the parts assembly page within Stratus. Here, you can see that the status of the assembly has been automatically updated to cut. Back on the landing page, you can also access the location of the part within the model, a view that would let you see where the part will be installed. And you can also change the status of the entire assembly from the tracking module. Streamline your cut list workflow and status tracking with Stratus and TigerStop.
So what that basically demonstrated is that from that package, I can create that cut list, send it directly over to that CNC machine where we'll nest it all. You'll see all your 2-inch, 4-inch pipe. The system will get into the TigerStop, and then it'll print that QR code for each individual piece of copper, steel, whatever type of items you're sending over to that particular device. We also, within Stratus now, we're recognizing all the points from the Autodesk point layout software. So we're creating a point file as well. So when you look at your pour areas, you'll be able to go grab that section. And for those of you that are inserting prior to pour, which I highly recommend, it'll not only give you your point list, but it'll also then give you a bill of materials for your bangets, your inserts, your DDIs, your helicopters for what you're going to be using to support your hangers. So we're building in a complete workflow where you're not having to, oh, do I have to jump over here to a piece of software to create points? Do I have to jump over here now to create cut lists? We're doing it, all the workflow directly in Stratus. So there is no, oh, I need another app for that. It's driving that whole mechanism of fabrication, cutting, points, directly to the appropriate device. Any sort of attachments as well, we can attach and create any type of report. And then obviously that package will have a status to it as well. These statuses then can come right back into my packages now. Go into my schedule. I can look at individual jobs. And this is one of the hardest tasks that when you look at your fabrication, and whether you're doing fabrication yourself or you're using another service to do your fabrication, it's that view in to say, hey, what's going through my facility? And we give you the ability to look at individual projects, or you can come down here and look at all jobs as well. Click on the schedule and we'll show every particular job you have and what the status, the start and end dates of those items here. One second here. There we go. So then you'll see your different your projects. If you hold your mouse over that item, it'll give you what the description of that particular package is, start, end date, and then soon we'll be modifying those hours to be able to update when you want to move that and being able to do some manpower loading here as well. Over here on the admin side, we started building this thing, and our sprint team said, hey, can we move into this? Now that you've got the assemblies, can you create packages? And then after we got the packages, they say, Todd, you have a package. Well, now I need to create a BOM. Can you make something that we can generate the BOM? After the BOM, they said, can we now be able to track that as far as know real time what the status of the materials are? And all of a sudden, the product started creeping, and scope creep, in my view, in the right way. Because what they were all wanting was one package to go into to really help drive their whole workflow. With that then came some other challenges in that, when you have somebody out in your weld shop, you may not really want to give that individual the ability to order, $300,000 worth of pipe, valves, and fittings. So we have a ability in the product now to go in and define what we call project roles, which are totally customizable. You can create inside of Stratus an individual that's a welder, tacker, purchasing agent, field foreman, whatever those roles are, you can define what that individual is going to be doing at your firm. And then all of the various features that we have in Stratus can be tuned up and given to that particular individual. And you'll see this is super granular. I scroll down here, it takes a while to get to it because every function has that ability to turn off and on within the program. We also, as far as when it comes over to the tracking statuses, these can be, once again, defined by your method of what you want to track. You can set up all your color coding. You can even set up rules now. So, hey, do I really want to be able to cut that pipe if that spool hasn't been QA/QC'd? So you could have a status say, hey, QA/QC all my spools, and before I can even go cut, it's going to make sure that's been processed. I couldn't have generated that cut list that I showed you a second ago had that, my workflow said that I've got to make sure that I've QA/QC'd all my spools. So these statuses are more than just colors. They literally are now becoming some of the workflows and the playbooks that you're going to have for the different items you may choose to fabricate or install. Cost categories. I'm not sure how much of that you do down here as far as job costing, but in the States, it's one of the big struggles that contractors always have is they estimate the job, and then they got to take this estimate and they have a bucket of money. They got to take that bucket of money and apply cost codes to it. Those cost codes and what we're doing in Stratus is that when we publish the model, before it just shows up in Stratus, we can cook that a little bit. As I said earlier, we can condition that. And so I can look at all my supply air, all my return air, and if I'm setting up cost codes by those areas, by systems, by service, by material type, I can apply the correct cost code to that. And so now I've got those numbers, because what I say at the beginning of this presentation is, hey, it's all about earned value. We need to know that costing if I'm going to be, at the end of the day, be able to say, hey, look, before the job ended, we're way ahead on our chilled water on the first floor. I've got to have that data, and I've got to be able to publish that information. Task definitions and task workflows. This gets into the Kanban board, so you can look at your process and you can set up the tasks of what that piece has to go through. A piece of ductwork has to be, first it has to be burned, then it's knocked together, and we can set up those different workstations. One of the things that give me another 3 weeks and I'll be able to show you another version of Stratus. We're taking now not only that ability to look at your job site, but we're also going to give you the ability to look inside your fab shop. And so we're getting asked by quite a few of our customers is that, Todd, you're showing everything that's going on at the job site, but I'd really like to see what's going on in my fabrication facility. I'd like to know, by my tool type as far as what my load is on that, and am I meeting my certain KPIs. So we're going to give you a view of not only of your job site, but of the fab shop here, and with all the various types of tools as well. And when I start talking about tools, of course, tools live inside of Stratus as well. And when I click on tools, you'll see in there that we have the Tiger Stop, label printers as well as a tool, so you can set up various scanning stations within the system. For those of you that are doing larger bore pipe here, I mentioned like the Watts cutter, that can live in the system. You can set up your own label template as well. So when you looked at that QR code, fully customizable, whatever you want to put on that QR code, you can define what you want on that QR code. From the tools, we get into stations. So a station can be, as I mentioned, it could be the Tiger Stop, but the reason we have these stations is that we think a tool should be smart enough to know what it can do. We have this great model where I know whether it's copper pipe, steel pipe, I know the diameter of that pipe, I know it's, hey, I've got spiral pipe on this job, but I have a spiral helix machine that can only go to a certain diameter. When I get over that diameter, I've got to go to Kavanaugh or somebody to go buy that larger diameter pipe. And so the tool is getting the ability now where we can have the material type in, what fab shop it lives in. So we're dialing that tool in so it can literally look at the model and say, I can build this for you. And you'll soon see that some of these tools now will be able to look at, hey, the guy down the street has this tool. If they register it, you're going to now be able to see that, hey, down the street they have that device that can take that header and fabricate it for us. Within the nomenclature here too is that we have processors in the system. I'm getting a little deep here with some of this, but the processor enables you to set up, okay, I spooled all my pipe, I packaged all my pipe, but then I need to take that package and I'm now going to create a skid. So we kind of thought we could build one package, but really you need to have multiple packages so that you can add that pipe to a skid and then track that skid through. So you can define packages now for all kinds of different your workflows for procurement, kitting, bagging, tagging, however you want to drive that. And it'll show up in a filter within the system. Containers. We have our package, but now we're taking our package, and that package could have a bunch of prefabbed hangers or a bunch of copper that's all been spooled out, and I can't really send that out on one batch. I may have a pallet that I want to put that on. That becomes containers inside of Stratus. So the idea is to never lose track of where those items are, and so when you're fabricating those up, we're going to be able to put a QR code directly on that pallet, directly on that hanger cart, that cage, and so you can set up all your containers in the system. And we're giving a mechanism of, once again, it's a bucket that you can throw all those parts and pieces in. When that particular shipment shows up at the job site, they can go look at that and they're saying, I wonder what I got today. They go into the filters and they just say, hey, let's look at this container 101, and it'll show them that, hey, container 101 is all this ductwork on this floor. So end of the day, you don't have to scan in every piece. A lot of people are saying, Todd, I know what's in my container. I'm just going to credit all those items and just say they've all been installed here. So a few other items here, and then we're going to open this up for some questions here in a minute. Not only will we do the piping side, but we'll also do the electrical side as well. So let me get into proving grounds here. We can open up this electrical room inside of Stratus, so all of your conduit, cable tray, similar to what I was doing on the piping side. Here we go. I can do all your electrical as well. And we can do the same type of tracking here. So when you look at this one, I like to show this model here because I think it really demonstrates, this color coding of how we're going to kit the model. You're going to see a huge change in the coming years of, of how we build. And I think it's going to move more and more to manufacturing facilities where, you'll be able to take the model and say, hey, do I have the right tools to be able to prefab those hangers? And if not, at least I'll kit them up in Stratus and I'll be able to send out to the right supplier or right manufacturer that can deliver those hangers in a kitted method. We know grid lines, we know floors, so conduit as well. It's happening in the States now that some of the biggest wholesaler suppliers are starting to buy tools where they can, where they just say, hey, here's a straight piece of conduit, add a bender in, and they're bending the conduit for you and delivering a prefabricated piece directly to the job site. So the supply chain is altering. Fabrication is changing the way we have to look at how we're going to build these buildings. And I mean, here's a perfect example of showing just all the different ways that we can take that job and literally be able to, from a perspective, say what's the most efficient way of kitting it, and then being able to say, now that I've kitted, who are my trade partners that I'm going to work with on how I'm going to fulfill this. We look at the supply chain and how do we treat the supply chain? We create this model, we create our spool, and we need that spool the next day, so we send them out a BOM a day before and we say, hey guys, can you get all this to me? if you start to think about what that could look like, if you could publish that and give it to your supply chain and let them have a look ahead earlier, you know, you'll start to see where those back orders really are going to become a thing of the past, because you're giving them a chance to react and to order those items. So within the system as well, jumping into one other piece here, we have this properties as well, so we can go in click on any item here, and it'll tell me my number of parts, my parts and pieces that live in that particular assembly. So kind of wrapping this all up, and we were going to open it up for about 10 minutes questions. Are we doing good time-wise here? Maybe finishing a few minutes early. We take the model, we publish the model, we condition the model, and then after the condition, it really is a pretty simple workflow where we take that and we put it in just various buckets. Whether it's a package that you're going to send through your fab shop or a package that you're going to send over to your trade partner or supply chain to have them produce it. Full visibility is what we see the future of. You're going to be able to take and allow them to, hey, I want to show you what my status is. I want to let you know how I'm doing on that, you know, that fabricated piece. I also wanted to let the owner know that, hey, look, you know, we're doing this data center, and I'm fabricating all this so that when that data center hits, you see that I've built all this. And so as I start to prefab it and build it, I want to be able to bill you, and I'm going to give you visibility in to see where I'm at that workflow. So that is a overview of Stratus. Once again, Andy and I would like to thank you for allowing us to come down and make the trip. I'd like to open it up for any sort of questions that you may have in regard to the product. Is Amanda in the room? Because she promised she was going to heckle me a little bit about you know, Stratus. So
Yeah, I'm here.
you're there? Okay.
Sure, there's questions. Any questions, guys? Got a couple of mics.
Good, good. All right.
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
Oh, great presentation there. I must say I'm kind of feeling this Stratus. I just got a couple of questions I just wanted to ask you. You mentioned that Stratus is a web-based product. I just wanted to know firstly, is the data bi-directional? Can you say in a situation where the assembly is changed because of, say, for example, you use the weld gap, are you able to push that information back into the altering software?
so when there are changes to the spool and those type of changes, we're able to push that back into the model,
Into the original authoring
into the
software?
original authoring. So we're still trying to keep that center of truth being the initial Revit model.
Okay.
So when I talked today all about publishing, I really didn't chat about that after you publish. When you publish again, the system says, hey, there's changes here. Let's bring those back into the model.
Okay. Secondly, with your rule-based decision, so you use an example where you wanted to take a cut length, and say you haven't gone through the QC process and you're trying to take off a cut length, it kind of alerts you that is that really what you want to do? So in that situation, if, say say let's say based on a project condition, you actually wanted to move forward with fabrication while doing the QC in parallel, and that's a project management decision, are you able to have some sort of a rule based where that allows a project manager to make that call?
So under the admin rights, that you could set the system up with an admin that kind of has, you know, a little bit more power to be able to override those.
Yeah.
So there is that ability to have admin rights to, you know, push things through that you've set up workflows and be able to kind of bypass those.
Okay. Lastly, will be on the collaboration side. In many instances, you will have, say for instance, in our business, so you have duct manufacturers which are a separate business from the contractor, obviously. Then if you are going to be using Stratus, does that mean that you are going to be collaborating directly with the manufacturer to have a view of what's going on in their fab shop, or how does that work on that collaboration front?
So when you look at the, the product here, and so as you start to bring, as you mentioned, the manufacturer into play here, that's one of the, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I really find exciting about, possibly bringing Stratus to your area here in Australia is that, because you have those type of standards, that, your contractor drew with the same standards, with your BIM MEP Oz standards. Stratus is a sharing tool in an environment, so you drew it with those standards. We're very closely, and Andy, you may want to comment on this as far as the match file that we're going to be able to create, so that they could draw that, and then that package then could be uploaded and literally deliver them the match file to go build that. And as they're building it, you're able to see, hey, look at this. This is the process of my ductwork. I don't have to call up, a Kavanaugh or a duct maker to say, hey, where's my ductwork? That you can go visibly look and see. So does that answer?
It's not exactly. So you are going to look in the model to see what the status of the product is, in terms of where it's at in the manufacturing process. So my question is, how do you get an information back from the manufacturer? So you as the contractor who is managing Stratus and organized your product in packages and the way you want it, and you send it out to your manufacturer. Then how do you now get the status information back from the manufacturer to know exactly where your products are? So is the manufacturer going to be invited on the Stratus?
Yes, yeah. Now, I will tell you, when you look at that part of Stratus, it's our goal that that's what we're building out next, is that sharing capability. But that's how the product has to behave, is that there'll be rights to say, look, I'm the contractor, so really, the contractor is going to own that particular model, but they're going to say, look, I've picked my supplier. Now I want to give them visibility in, and visibility in through the manufacturing process so I can see it. So it is our intent to be able to work very closely with the manufacturer and the contractor for that visibility.